Well, hey guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the build of this beautiful Hispano Aviation Bull aircraft. This is build video number 2 in the series, not including the unboxing video. So we got lots done in the last video, but this one will be moving on to the wings most likely. So stay tuned and we'll dive back in to this bull. All right guys, so last video we got the tail section done, the vertical, horizontal stab, we got the pipe mounted, we got the engine mounted, that stuff's all done, went together really well. I believe we're gonna move on to the wings next because we need to deal with our wiring that's coming forward. I don't suspect these wings to be overly complicated. Everything on this build so far has been easy actually. If you guys are interested in this aircraft, there's some links down below to Aero Panda, the manufacturer is Hispano Aviation, but our North America dealer is Aero Panda. So check that out if you're interested in this thing. It is an absolute beauty. So without further ado, let's pull these wings out, which are right down there in the wing bags, and we'll get started on that. All right, so we've got the wings out on the stand here. The aircraft, the Bull is over on the opening or the hood stand. Put the carbon wing tube through the aircraft. Snug fit for sure. Hopefully it loosens up a little bit. I'm not going to do anything to it though, but nice, impressive fit. So first thing we need to do on these wings is, in my opinion, get the gear sorted out. I like to do that first if I can, and in this case it definitely is the next step. So we're going to pull the Electron stuff out, we're going to get it kind of organized, and most of all we're going to go through and make sure everything is Loctited. Flaps are internal here, so flap servo actually sits right there, okay, right in that spot, and aileron servos here. And I need to figure out where we're mounting our wires, or where the wires are going to come through. So it doesn't make any sense to have them here. So our wires are going to come out the front of the wing right there, which means that we'll open up a little hole in the fuselage right there. And all of our wires are going to sit right in this spot here. So beautiful layup on this wing. We've got all carbon fiber, nice aircraft ply on the gear mounts. So pretty nice looking stuff. So let's pull this Electron gear out and see what we got. All right, and here's our Electron setup. I'll talk a little bit about this because it's a bit of a custom setup for this, this aircraft. Now, the landing gear themselves are the ER40s, which are used on a lot of smaller models. Nice to see on this model because they're very light, but they also work very, very well. And this model, the Bull, is extremely light, so it's going to work awesome. We've got the GS200 controller, which is great because this has the built-in gyro and all that kind of stuff. So nice setup on this. And the neat thing about this Electron setup is normally, like the nose gear here is a 6mm pin. The mains are an 8mm pin. So that's nice to see on the mains. And that's not something I think is overly common with the ER40s. Usually it's 6mm all around. So I like that. We've got the blacked out set. So this is the Electron blacked out set, has Aero Panda logo on there, which is great. And so that's the whole setup of landing gear. So fairly straightforward on the Electron stuff. You do have to flat spot the pins. What we need to do is get these guys assembled, and then we'll start working on mounting the gear themselves. Now the gear, I already put one of these in here. Now the gear has a fair bit of movement on this one. The front's already drilled for us, but on this one we've got a fair bit of movement. So what we're going to do is we've got to get that leg installed, and at least get the leg installed. We don't want to tighten up the bolts yet, but that gives us our position for everything, which is important. So I'm going to do a couple things here. We're going to get our wires or cables run for the landing gear so we can actually extend this and retract it. And the other thing we're going to do is when I use the GS200, with most systems you can set this up with a bus system. So what that means is you may have, we'll just say channel 13 and 12 set up as your gear channel and your brake channel. But if you use the bus system, all you need is one cable going to the actual controller itself. If we do it the conventional way, we need a gear in line, a brake in line, and we need a steering in line. If we do it the bus way, we just need a gear in line, and then we need to run a patch lead from the brake to the steering in, and it just simplifies the wiring setup. So I'm probably going to set it up that way just to make things more simple. And so we got to get that set up so we can actually extend and retract this gear. So I'm going to do a little bit of that stuff. If I find anything weird, I'll let you guys know, but it's all very straightforward stuff. Electrons also comes with a great wiring diagram in case you're confused on how that works. And this is pretty straightforward, tells you the battery requirements as well. So anyways, let's get these things kind of assembled. All right, guys, and it is time for another episode of Tip Time, and this Tip Time has been brought to you by Trusty Bent Screwdriver. So one of the common questions I've got lately was around brakes. So I always like to put a little bit of silicone oil on my brakes. Doesn't matter what it is, whether it's electronic, air, whatever, and just do a light film of the silicone oil, and that just prevents everything from locking up. Just a nice little touch to make things work better. So that's a little tip for you. All right, so I've got everything programmed and hooked up in the radio system, and I'm just going to show you here what I do for my flat spot process. So what I do is I flat spot the pin that goes into the landing gear first, and then once we get everything set up on the aircraft and we're adjusting our toe in, then we make the adjustments on the part that the leg actually mounts to. So what I do in this case, it doesn't really matter where it is, right? So I just get this inserted and tighten the pinch bolts down, and it's probably going to be hard to see it, but if you look really close, you can see the spots where the bolts have made marks. So we're just going to put a flat spot there, and then we can get the pin mounted in the leg, in the gear, and then that part is done. All right, so I've made my flat spots there. You don't need to go crazy on the flat spots. So just a little indent is all you need. You can see it there, perfect. So what we'll do now is we'll get this part of the pin mounted in the retract. We'll tighten that down, and then all of our on and offs, adjustments, in and outs and stuff will be done with the leg pin. All right, guys, so working on the fitting of this landing gear. It's a bit of a challenge on the mains, and the reason for that is our gear itself needs to have some angle put in. So on the back of these Electron struts, there's the angle adjust right there, so we've got to use that for sure. And we've got a little bit of preload installed on that. The other thing is, because this wing is so tight, the gear itself is not sitting down level. You can see there, I'm pushing the gear down level, and we're fighting the wheel. So I've also kind of eyeballed a little bit of toe in and stuff like that. What I did was add some tape that follows the root of the wing, and added a couple degrees of toe in, cinch this leg down just so we have a good idea of where we actually are going to end up. So what I need to do is install some packers or washers underneath the landing gear mounts. So what I'm going to do now is get this kind of lined up. So what I do in this situation, what I do is hold down the backside, and when I hold down the backside, I flick the gear switch and check and see how it goes through the wing wheel opening. That's kind of my first concern. Of course, that's adjustable, but once I kind of get it lined up and I'm happy with where everything's sitting, I'm going to make sure I hold this down on the back, and I'm going to drill at least 2 of those holes into the wood structure. and that makes sure that we're kind of getting things lined up. So that's kind of my process here. It's a lot of kind of figuring and all that kind of stuff, but it does usually work quite well. What I'll probably do in this case is use some small servo screws to hold this down, and then when we drill it out larger, those small servo screws won't be an issue. All right, so I made some carbon packers here to go underneath the gear. Now this carbon is just a plate that I've ordered quite a while ago, and that's the thickness right there. So I ended up trying this out with 2 washers, and it worked out perfectly. So I had a piece of carbon that was exactly the same thickness, and that's what we're putting underneath the landing gear. So I've glued that with Hysol in place and just waiting for that to cure. Installed the landing gear and just put one of my weight balls on top of it just to give it some compression, because putting clamps in there is really tough. So we're letting this cure, and when that's kind of kicked off and stiff, then we'll get the gear mounted in place. So I've already run the wires through for this wing, and we'll have to do the same on that other wing. It's a bit of a pain, but the easiest way to route them is you follow the path of the cables for the servos. So it comes out through the landing gear over this way, and then down to this part of the wing. So it goes underneath or over top of the main wing tube. The flap servo sits right here. So that's the easiest path to get to this area. And you're gonna have servo lines come underneath here anyways, so there's a nice way to keep them out of the path of the landing gear, no problem. So while we're waiting for that stuff to cure, what we're gonna do is work on the front landing gear and get that all sorted out as well. Now that should be a lot easier to mount because it's pre-drilled. So we'll get everything ready for that and we'll take a look at that. All right, so our front gear is ready to go, and this actually worked out really well. I'm quite impressed with the setup on this. So a Seacraft servo arm, the stock servo arm, we were able to use a clevis on that, and it lines up just perfectly. So that's all done. I just finished flat spotting our front 6mm shaft there. So you can see the little flat spots. We got those done on both sides, and this is ready to have the gear installed and go in the aircraft. All right, so the front gear is mounted. This one was a little bit tricky. The 4 holes in the stock plate, they're a little bit narrower than the actual holes. So all the screw heads fit in, and I used wood screws to screw those down. But all the wood screws go through the holes, but depending on which ones you tighten up first, that will skew the angle and position of the wheel. So what I ended up doing was doing up this side first, and then opened up the holes on that far side, and then screwed the screws in. Treated the holes with CA before I screwed them in. And I did end up taking about 2mm off of this side here. You can kind of still see a little bit of my Sharpie mark. So I did that right here and right there, and that got it nice and centered. Happy with that, and the nose wheel turned out really nice, so that's great. The actual wires themselves just end up coming on the underside of the vent plate there. So we'll worry about getting those run as well, so they're neat and tidy. And of course we have to keep in mind the servo wire for the gear. We have to allow enough slack. So I'm not going to fix those in place yet, but that is the front nose mounted. Now we're going to go back to the mains and get these guys finished. Our carbon plates should be nice and cured by now, and we can kind of start getting those figured out. All right, so both gear is installed on the aircraft. We've moved on to the surfaces. So the gear was definitely a bit of a chore to get installed. When you get the right amount of toe in on this wheel, I think the back part of the wheel always contacts the upper surface. Not a problem, everything seems to work good. We did run the brake line here just out to the side. Usually I like to run it through the back portion and have it come in and out as the gear retracts and extends. But this area is just too tight to have that happen. This actually works out even better, and there's less cable moving in and out, so we just used the spiral wrap there for that area, so all worked out good. Secured our brake lead here just with black electrical tape. So the gear's done. Made a little bit of a cutout here for the spring head right there on the gear. But that's basically the complicated part of the wings is the gear, and it definitely needs a polish. Look at all those fingerprints. So we haven't done anything with the leads here because we've got our flap and aileron and all that stuff to run through this area. And then once it's all run, then we will deal with that at the end. But we're moving on to the surfaces. So starting off with the aileron surface, Hispano Aviation puts a string in here for your aileron lead, so that made it really easy to get the lead through there. So here's our aileron lead, and we've already got one of the servo trays set up. Now, there's no instructions for this aircraft, but everything's pretty straightforward. There's no mount inside there. There's no mount on the door, but the kit did include 2 of these L brackets, so I figured that's what we're supposed to be using. These cover plates are also carbon fiber, so they're very, very stiff. And this setup to me just kind of made sense. So we mounted the L brackets onto the servo with the threaded side, and then through the actual servo cover, we just used nuts and bolts to hold that in place. So seems like that is going to work just perfect, and I'm happy with that. So we used one of these skinny 1-inch JR servo arms, and this mates up perfectly with the hardware that comes with the kit. And when this is all installed, it's perfectly straight to the control arms there, so everything lines up just beautifully. So the ailerons on this aircraft, you're using the long control arms that come with this. And these control arms from MP Jets, one side is threaded right, one side is threaded left, and then all the clevises here are threaded left. These are threaded right, so it's pretty straightforward how this all goes together. And these pins here actually mate with those JR servo arms beautifully. All right, so I'll just show you how I set up the flaps here, guys. We're just powering everything on. And we've got the left flap servo sitting here. The right flap servo is installed. And I'll show you the motion here. So fairly straightforward. That's full flaps, 80 millimeters of travel. Half flaps. Need to do a little adjustment there. Okay, so there's flaps off. We've got takeoff flaps, which is like 38 millimeters of travel. And then we've got our landing flaps, which is 80 millimeters of travel right there. So the way that this was all planned out was based on that 80 millimeters of flap travel. So you can see in there the linkage set up for the flaps. I'll activate the flaps now. So that is landing flaps, takeoff mode, half flaps, and flaps off. We're at basically straight up and down on that arm. Now, if we had to retract that anymore, we've got very little movement because our output point is so close to the servo shaft. So we've got great power on this setup, and we're pretty limited to exactly what we have. So if we wanted to get any more travel, we'd have to put a longer servo arm on, but this is what is recommended, is the 80 millimeters of flap travel. And then here's a shot of the other servo. So that is full flaps, takeoff flaps, and flaps up. So the actual output hole that we're using is that close guy right there, which is a stock one. And this is the one that we drilled that I started using, and it was just too much length on the servo arm to actually work. So this one ended up working perfectly, and I'm happy with it. What I did here with this, the right wing, is I wanted to finish it all up before we continued on the left one. So I got the connector all finished up here, so just put some snakeskin over the 4 wires, and we've got our typical ash lock connector. Again, I love these things because you can just plug a servo lead in there like I just did to set up the aileron, and it just makes it really easy. So now that the connector's done, moved on to the aileron control surface. So we're using the 1-inch horn on the aileron, and using the full 1-inch location. After doing all this, we could go closer to the center of the servo, but I'm happy with that location. It's fine. And I did have to take about 5 millimeters off of the rod. So when I did that, thread on a nut, cut it with the hacksaw, and then unthread the nut so it makes good threads. So that part's done as well too. And so our aileron surface is all finished. And again, I've been very happy with all of this hardware. Like, there is zero play in this aileron. So works out very well, and nice quality stuff. So with this right wing done, we are ready to move on to the left one. All we're going to do here is repeat everything we've done. So the gear is all installed and ready to go. We do need to install our aileron and our flap and get that stuff done. All we're doing is copying what we did on the first wing, so it should go quite quickly. But we'll get this done, and then we'll be able to install the wings on that beautiful aircraft over there. All right, guys, both wings are complete. And turned out awesome. We've got both of the wiring completed on the wings, and also did the wiring harness on the fuselage side. So what I use here, show you on this side. So I use my 6mm Festo through fitting on the fuselage, put a piece of shrink tubing over top of all the wires, and then a zip tie on this side, a zip tie on the interior side so it can't move anywhere. So nice, easy plug-in system for the wings, and serviceable, functional, simple, cost-effective, works good. So our bundle on the inside is getting bigger, but let's toss these wings on and see what they look like. All right, guys, and there she is on her legs for the first time, the HISPANO Aviation Bull. So just doing some planning now at this point. I've got a 6-pound ball here in the front, and that 6-pound ball, without that in there, the plane just goes boom, lifts its nose right up. But even now, it's quite light on the nose. I suspect that's probably the amount of stuff that we'll end up putting in the nose. Just working on the UAT location as well too. So I think here's probably the best location. The problem with putting it right there beside the tank is it's on an angle, and I don't want to have to build anything up. This spot works out well. Unlike a regular tank, it really doesn't matter which direction this faces. The only thing that matters is you get the air out when you fill. So because I use my 3D printed angles that I sell on my website, or UAT mounts, gets the air out every single time. So the path for this, we'd have this line going to our fuel pump, which will probably sit right there. This line will go to this tank, and then the top vent here will go to this pickup line here, and then our vent will go out to the bottom of the fuselage. So that is probably where we'll end up putting our UAT. Our cables will be nicely bundled together. That works out awesome. And because of the amount of nose weight we'll probably need in here, I'll probably end up putting the batteries on the front tray is kind of what I suspect. So, but that is, that's the Bull on her feet for the first time. Looks phenomenal. And really light aircraft. I don't know what the weight is right now, but still with those wings on and everything, it is incredible. All right, guys, and there's the Bull with its wings complete. So episode number 2 in the build series, we essentially got the wings completed. We got the landing gear mounted in the main wings, in the nose of the aircraft. And we've got all the surfaces done in the wings. So this has been a very quick build so far. The most challenging part has definitely been the landing gear. The mains and the front, they all have their own little quirks, but nothing overly crazy. It's just fitting it to this specific aircraft. So anyways, guys, next episode, we are going to do all the equipment installation and probably fire this thing up. Essentially, we've got all the equipment left to install and the wiring and plumbing and stuff, but absolutely awesome quick build. Very impressed with this aircraft still and so far. It's been awesome, and it's tons of fun to put this thing together. It's sad that I have to wait like 4 or 5 more months to fly this thing, but looking forward to it. So thanks, guys, for watching the HISPANO Aviation Bull build series. If you have any questions or comments, list them down below. Again, this aircraft is available at Aero Panda and there's a link to their website down below. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.
Mm-hmm.